Welcome to our Facebook Live today. It is July 31st, which means tomorrow is
Common
August
App.
1st.
Common
Yeah,
App opens.
that's why I thought of this, like
Yeah.
let's do this right before the Common App. The Common App opens up tomorrow for the next cycle. Parents of seniors may be starting to panic a bit. Although you may have been panicking before this.
I know. I was just thinking that. Also, I will say, like, a lot of people fill it out before this, and it does roll over, and it's
Yeah.
gotten better. I mean, like a few years ago, it was like bad. Like it was like, don't do it before. But now it's like, yeah, whatever.
But for those who haven't filled anything out, that's okay.
Yeah,
There's no
because
rush.
it really technically opens tomorrow.
Yeah. And if this is your first time going through the process, you may be extra panicked. That's okay too. So that's why we wanted to jump on Facebook and discuss this. And we're going to discuss your role in college applications and answer any questions you have. And everyone who commented on the post, I already got those questions. You can keep commenting if you want, or you can comment under this Facebook Live, and we'll try to get to those too. If not, we'll answer them afterwards, on our page. On our group. Okay, I was just looking at my memories on Facebook, which I do every day. And guess what I was doing 5 years ago?
5 years ago? Wait,
5 years ago.
Was someone applying to college? No. Well, yeah.
5 years ago, I was loading up the car.
And the twins?
And True. And we were getting ready to go on a big cross-country drive. And then, our final destination for him was Hamilton College in New York. And I got all these pictures of him, and he looks really young and cute and kind of nervous, right? And there's a picture of him packing up what he wants to take to his dorm and everything. And it's super, super cute. So I was just thinking about that and how that time passes really quick. Now he's about to start his second year as a PhD student at NC State. So it's going to go by quickly. So Farrar, you and I have been through this many times with our own kids, 5 of them between us. Yeah. What was your biggest worry when you first started this whole process as a parent?
Like specifically the Common App process, or
yeah, let's say either.
I mean, I think there's this sort of like, will I justify myself, and everything that we did? Like, I think there's this deep-seated fear. That's what I felt. And I was kind of, I don't know, like a little cocky about it. Like, I can do this, I mean, also, I will say, like, by the time that my kids applied to college, we had been working with homeschoolers for
right.
years. So,
right.
So there's that.
So it comes from a good place.
Yes. But I think, I did have this worry, like, okay, will people get it? Will people understand, what my kid did that was actually impressive? And, and I think that like, I think it leads a lot of people, I will say, like, to overcompensate in various ways.
Yes.
Which I don't think is always good. I mean, I've seen it the other way, where people are like, well, obviously it was fine. And then they submit and they don't give a lot of paperwork, and then they're like, why are these colleges questioning us? And
why do I need to do all this?
Right, exactly. Which, you're a school, like schools. I mean, I worked in school administration and as a teacher, in schools, and like in a small school. And like, I mean, it's like a lot of work, like for the school counselor. So it's not like you're being asked to do something they're not doing too. Like, it feels weird because it's different. It's a different lane than you've been in.
It feels weird too, because you're a homeschooler, and people, there's this idea that people are always questioning if you're doing enough as a homeschooler. And so you take that with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it is like a balance, right? Like, you want, you do want to be able to say to them, like, look, we did things, like, look at this project, look at this book list, like, look at these AP classes, or, I mean, whatever it is that your kid did. You want to show them that, and you want it to look good. On the other hand, like, sort of more and more paperwork, like, and especially if it's like disorganized, I think that doesn't show.
Or if it's just a ton. I mean, they don't have a lot of time to read 20 pages of course descriptions. I mean, they just don't. So you're going to lose something. So be careful what you.
I always say control the narrative. You want to control the narrative. And you
Yeah.
can't do that. The longer it gets, the less control you have, because the less that you know that they're even going to look at any of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So it's
I do
really,
think it's also like, it can look bad, when you attach like 20 pages of like, like Coursera certificates or something, they do. I mean, I've seen parents
I
like want
know.
to do that. And
Yeah.
I don't think that serves your kid well,
No,
or,
no.
when you have like a page long biography of every teacher that they have, like
No.
schools don't do that. Like, this is not, just, I mean, if they happen to have like a lot of like highly qualified teachers, like great, like stick PhD after their name, like in the little
Right.
box on the course description. That's it. That's all you should do. Like, they don't need a whole biography. So I just think like parents, there's this balance. Like, you do want to be like, look, we did these things. We were very organized. Look how official we were.
It was a legitimate.
It was very legitimate. Look how official we are. But then you don't want to overcompensate by being like, every course had a this and it had a that and it had a, and it's like, wait, what? Like, what is all this? Like, they'll get confused. So,
Yeah. You got to be careful what you put in there, which I think leads to stress for a lot of parents.
mm-hmm.
How to get it right, how to get that balance right and everything.
Well, and also I think one of the things that we started talking about, which I like 4 years ago or whatever, like, and when we first, like, I didn't realize 4 or 5 years ago, like when we started doing this, I didn't realize once you upload those documents, they're uploaded if you're using a Common App.
So that's funny, because we had a question about the biggest mistakes that parents make on their side of the Common App. And I was thinking one of the biggest mistakes we've ever seen is when a parent wrote their counselor letter specifically to one school only.
Yeah. And I only seen that once, but we have had it multiple times now when the parent like just didn't realize that like what the counselor document is supposed to be, and they just upload everything and they're like, well, I'm sure I can fix it later,
Yeah.
And you can't. Like, you can in some ways because you can submit these optional reports, but you can't.
Yeah, you can correct things.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still going to see the original stuff.
Yeah, they'll see them first. They'll see the originals first.
Yeah. So that would probably be the biggest mistake, is just to make sure before you upload anything
mm-hmm.
that it's exactly the way you want it.
But, on the flip side, don't freak out if you find a typo. Like, I found a couple typos, like a couple days like after I submitted my kid. That's okay. Like, if you realize like, oh, I left off the 8th book that we read, that like, oh my God, just
fine.
chill.
Don't worry about it. Also, if the course has changed, you have the mid-year report you get to do. So if there's any changes, that's very common.
Oh yeah, especially if you're swapping one thing for another, like dual enrollment course for another dual enrollment course. Oh, that's a big mistake that I've seen is parents don't put senior year courses on the transcript at all. And so then it looks, or they only put the fall courses when half the year is going to be in spring because they're using like a block schedule, or they're using dual enrollment. And it's sort of like, to colleges at first glance, it may look like there's like senior year is really paltry, and the student does put in their senior year courses on the Common App additionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if they do it, then sometimes that's gonna, they'll figure it out. But like,
what I was just thinking?
It looks better. It's nice and clean.
Yeah.
They'll see it all. You want them to see it.
It's always nice. It's always great if it looks nice and clean.
Yes.
That's really good. I mean, the look of your paperwork is kind of important, I would say. Just that it's easy to read for whoever's reviewing it.
Because it's not, they're not judging you on it exactly. But the flip side is,
no, it's not judging. It's just like, can I read it really quickly and find the information I need fast?
Yeah, because they could misunderstand it or something. Like, that's what you don't want.
Yeah.
Or be confused by it. So then they waste their time trying to understand what's on the transcript.
Mm-hmm.
They never even look at your course descriptions because they couldn't understand what was on the transcript in the first place.
Or they ran out of time.
Yeah, because they ran out of time.
Yeah, which happens a lot. Any other mistakes? I think here's a mistake is because I see this in the group sometimes when someone's like, well, you don't really need course descriptions at all. A lot of schools don't require them, which may be true depending on your kids' list, but it's always a good thing, I think, to do your course descriptions and upload them. If the school's not going to read them, the school's not going to read them, right? But course descriptions can add a bit to your students' application. So maybe they'll glance at them and be impressed by a few things. So spending that time won't hurt you and it won't hurt your student. So I recommend always doing all that.
I always, because you also, in junior year, which is kind of at the end of junior year, which is when you kind of should be pulling those things together, ideally.
Right.
You don't know for sure what your kid is going to do. I think you want to leave those doors open. It looks better if you've got some sort of course descriptions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it just adds to the overall picture, I think.
Yeah. Someone just asked if the parent is the one who does the course descriptions or the student.
Well, I was going to say, so here's another question too, because you were just bringing this up. When should you start working on the course descriptions? Is it okay to do it in 9th and 10th? Is it okay to wait until the end of junior year or just the beginning of senior year?
I mean, you'll be happier if you do it starting in 9th grade.
How many people actually do that? I mean, some people do. I didn't when I did this the first time because I just wasn't. I know. We're different that way. We're different that way. I was desperately looking.
I didn't have them all nice and neat, like in little boxes and with the, I just had, I cut and pasted the course description from the outside into like a big messy document,
Yeah.
So I didn't have them like, oh, here's this presentable thing that I could just give you at any time. Like, it's not like that. Because also I was making decisions like at the end, even about courses from previous years, like, okay,
I would say
this is an activity,
that kind
of stuff.
I would say it's always great to keep notes right from the beginning of freshman year, because one thing that we've seen is that a provider will just disappear and then you don't have the course description or anything, which can be really bad.
A certain provider cleaned off a certain provider that I'm thinking of cleans their course description.
I know who you're thinking of.
Single year.
Yeah.
And you can never get the old ones back. And so, and I mean, first of all, obnoxious.
Frustrating.
So frustrating. But second of all, like that, you just don't know. I mean, I've also seen it where a provider that people were using folds, and so then it's gone. And so that's not their fault necessarily. Like, it's a business, they move on, but you may not be able to contact them again.
Yeah, especially if they just take down their site right away. So always take notes. That really is helpful of everything, actually, and keep book lists. That's really helpful. Any activities your kid did, that's helpful. Something might be a course, something might be an activity later, you don't know.
I feel like this is like you're your kid's secretary. You know what I mean? I'm serious. Like,
no, I know.
I always think of this as like you're doing the executive functioning for your kid. Like, and this is appropriate. Schools do this too. Like,
right.
So, schools would be keeping records and so on and so forth. And so you're doing that so that when your kid sits down to do everything and you sit down to do your side, then it's all there for both of you. And you can be like, here's all those activities. You can remind them. Sometimes that's useful too. Like with the essay, I've had, especially when students are stuck, I've had parents be like, wait, why aren't you writing about this? And sometimes the kid goes, oh, I don't know. I didn't even think of that. And it's like a great topic because sometimes we know our kids really well,
Yeah. And sometimes the teen brain forgets.
Like sometimes parents are like, this will be a perfect topic. And I'm like, oh gosh, don't write about that. Like, but it is the case that you have a lot of memories of like great stories and times your kid did a thing. And, and so that's activities and courses and everything. And I think it's really useful. So somebody did ask about like who uploads it. You, the parent, that's your job. So there's these real basics. There's these two sides of the Common App. If you're using the Common App, and we can talk a little bit about, other things, but most applications are going to be the Common App. If your student makes their account first, and then they go into a specific application for a specific school, and there's a place where it says recommenders, and you're a recommender, you're the counselor recommender, and then they invite you as the counselor recommender. they start by doing it for that specific school. But once they've done it for one school, you are automatically assigned for every single school. That's not true for teacher recommenders and outside other recommenders like a job or a scoutmaster or something like that. Those recommenders, they assign so they can pick different ones for different schools. But this one, once they've invited you as the counselor, we'll send you an email and then you can set up your account. And if you've done it with previous students, they'll invite you and your account will just still be there. And you can go back in it and start over and change everything. So
I think it's important to note that that first school, it doesn't matter what it is at all.
mm-hmm.
It's just
no, it
pick a
doesn't.
school.
And
Yeah.
before they can do it, they have to waive their FERPA rights.
Yeah.
And so this is their right to see the counselor and the teacher recommendations. They should waive those. That's literally, it's very limited. They're not waiving all their FERPA rights. They're just waiving the ability to see those recommendations. And that keeps it honest so that the colleges know that they didn't have undue influence and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah. So this is really good. This kind of segues into when we're talking about what the parent's role is and what the student's role is. And I know we have had some discussions about this between you and me.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to applying to colleges, what do you think is the parent's role in everything besides their side of the Common App, in the counselor document? How best is it to support students or your student?
I mean, I do think that you are like their secretary and they're the
Mhm.
boss. I mean, I'm serious. Like it's a little bit.
I know you're serious.
I mean, it depends on the kind of relationship that you have with your kid. I mean, one of the things I was saying to you is that there's no one thing that parents, well, there are some, I mean, like, don't write your kid's essay. Like,
No, don't do
like,
that.
oh my gosh. But like, they're different, there's different things that parents do. And I think they all can be good, but you can't do all of them. Like,
Right.
because then if you've done all of them, you've taken on the whole job of the application process. So like potentially, you could be the one who are taking the lead on researching the college list and, deciding, where to visit. And, you could be sitting down to brainstorm the essay with them and then helping them edit it. You could be, like doing the activity list with them,
yeah.
like they say it and you write it down and then they polish, like it could be a collaborative like where you're organizing that for them. I mean, you could sit down and watch them do the Common App, like, it's data entry. It's just like, I mean, the main part, it's just, and it is useful for you to be there. It's going to ask some questions like, where did your parents go to school and things like that, that they may not know offhand. So things like that, and all of that is fine. Like but if you're doing literally all of
Everything.
it, then it starts to be a problem. Like, so any one of those things is fine. It's when you do every single piece of it, then it starts to be like, well, who's applying to college here anyway?
Who's going to college?
And yes, exactly.
Who's going to be the one showing up on campus in a year? Yeah. It's not going to be you. It's going to be your kid. And you want them to have some ownership over it so that they're excited, first of all, about the whole process.
Right.
And so they have some control on where they end up. So they're excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
And just so they're ready to be they're going to be on their own for the most part in a year.
Yeah.
And they're going to be adults. They have to be ready to do that. They have to be ready to take that next step. And this is one way to kind of like show and build confidence in them. Oh, look, I applied to all these schools and then I picked one and now I'm going off, and I took leadership in this.
Yes, exactly. But also the other thing I'd say is it's definitely their job to communicate with admissions.
Oh, definitely. Unless it's financial questions or something about the counselor documents.
You can do, or something very specific about your documents. Yeah. But even stuff about the documents, it's better if they do it because it shows, oh yeah, I may be a homeschooler, but like I am taking the initiative. I have independence.
Yeah. Unless it's something really specific that a counselor would only do. But otherwise, I think it's great to reach out to admissions. Even if you don't really have a question, you can make one up and reach out to them.
But for the kid to do it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, the kid.
And I
Yeah.
just like, that first college visit that maybe you take like early on in the process, like maybe like after sophomore year or something in the summer, like you had to do your first tour. Like it's okay if you're the one who asks some questions.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
It's just like if you become the one who is the one who asks questions every time,
Yeah.
then it's a problem.
I think too, though, I would just say that if you have a kid or a teen who has some learning disabilities or anything, that can change a little bit for what your role is exactly.
Yeah, that you're scaffolding. But then again, you have to think about, well, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
When they go to these schools, one of these schools that you've been researching with them, how is that process going to transition? I agree. Like some students need, they need more outside. I mean, again, that's
Yeah.
why you're the secretary. Like,
Yeah.
that's what secretaries do, is
Yeah.
executive functioning support. And so
And
I
you may
think
have that role, the first year of your kid being at college. You may be checking in a little bit if they need that, until they transition to something else to help them.
yeah, or they may have accommodations that
Yeah,
are
or an executive function coach, or
yeah, exactly. Or yeah, you may
or at a
hire,
program, like
yep,
at
you may
University of
put them in a
Denver.
program at university
Yeah.
or an add-on program. So a lot of different options. But I guess, you don't want a student who isn't really ready. Like if they're not that's part of applying to college, is then you have to be ready to go to college.
Mhm.
So I think all of that is part of it.
I think sometimes, and it's just, society today and parents, us as parents today, we feel all this pressure, and if your kid doesn't get into the best college, they may not have the best success in their adult life. And you get swept up into it. And I think everyone does a little bit. It's hard to take a step back. So, you're researching colleges and you want them to go to this program and it's the best one out there. And, you feel like you have to let them, make sure they have the opportunity for the very best. And sometimes you get so swept up that you don't realize how involved you are in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I would just recommend taking a step back every once in a while and making sure your team's right there with you and taking the lead.
Check yourself,
Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of pressure. I mean,
Mhm.
everyone succumbs to it a bit.
Yeah. I mean, someone asked another question about the essays. I mean, it is just one
Okay.
it is just one big Common App essay. And then individual schools have individual essays. Some have a lot, some have a little, just depends on the school. I mean, I
Depends
do
if you're
feel like,
applying like an honors program, that might have a
Mhm.
bigger one.
Yeah, exactly. And so it varies a lot. Some students end up with a lot of essays. I would say like that's like a good job for a parent to do for a student who needs some support, is pull all the essay topics,
Yeah.
and put them in a document for them, and, help them strategize like how to reuse them. That's something that I do for clients.
Because you can reuse a lot of
literally
essays for
spend tomorrow
multiple
doing.
places. Yeah. You can reuse those essays though for different
Yes.
schools. So
You can reuse even the why this school can have some core things like, because if your student has a particular type of program or particular approach, particular types of connections that they're looking for, then they have personal things to say about themselves. So again, you can help them figure out what those things are. I will say though, the essay, I mean, this is like a perfect example of where I see parents get in the way the most often on the essay. I mean, where parents, I'm thinking of a situation I'm dealing with right now, but where parents get in the way and just because parents don't always have the right idea about what makes a great essay.
it usually comes from a good place when they get in the way.
Oh, I think it always comes from a good place, because you want what's best for your kid.
Yeah.
And so I think but I find that a lot of parents lean into very cliched topics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing that I see. And also parents maybe don't realize that, I mean, admissions has the whole,
Picture.
application. They've got the whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so the essay is not a good place to like reiterate the entire activity list. So I think, sometimes parents just have a different idea. Also, like, admissions wants your kid's voice. Like they don't want it to be super formal. Sometimes
Super
parents,
canned.
Yeah, sometimes parents don't get that. So there's a
Yeah.
number of different elements. I mean, some parents get it. Like so it just depends on your relationship with your kid. But I think it's like a really good example of like that's a place where you kind of have to step back at some point.
Yeah.
And because it's your kid's story that they're telling. And
And it's
so
their voice, and that's
their
unique to them
voice.
only.
Exactly. So maybe you help with the brainstorming, you help with the editing and revision, maybe, but maybe have someone else do it. That's another possibility. But then even if you are the helper, they're the ones who have to really do that. Like it really has to be them.
I would say too, admissions can tell when a parent's written an essay. A parent's
Yeah,
voice sounds very different than a young person's voice.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So get out of the way, because it'll help them in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah.
With that essay. Yeah. And if their essay is super quirky and you're like, I don't think this is gonna work, and I think you should do a completely different topic. Yeah, it really can work. It can help them stand out.
Yeah. Let them do the essay they're called to do.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing I would say.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, here's another one. Career counseling for someone trying to figure out what to major in. One thing I would say about that is there's a lot of great exploration programs at universities that are really worth looking at if you have a teen who's really undecided on everything by the time it's to apply. I know it. I only know this because my kid went there. Virginia Tech has one called, I think, university studies or something, and you work one-on-one with someone to figure out what you want to major in. You go in undeclared, but you can pick out any major at any of the colleges there, which is really nice because that's not always an option. Like sometimes STEM's not open to you if you're undeclared or engineering or something. But some of these schools have
RIT has a really good exploration.
Purdue's got a great one too. So I mean, there are some really good undeclared exploration programs out there. Before that, though, any advice for before applying?
I mean, I think that actually is something parents can do, is introduce different things. I think, again, check yourself that it's not your vision of what you want to do or your vision of what you think your kid should be doing, or
right.
I mean, make sure that and also be open yourself, because I get surprised every year at I keep learning about new jobs that are out there and new majors and pathways for students.
Especially right now, it's changing a lot.
It is. There's a lot of changeover. There's a lot more interdisciplinary sort of tech and art kind of majors coming through. Things in like digital humanities and all these sort of overlaps in these different areas between like engineering and computing and all this kind of stuff. So I would say, like, be open to being aware that you don't know everything. So that's all part of it too. Like, your kid knows they don't know, but sometimes parents think they know and they don't. Like, so of what's out there, like it's more than just like, history, English, biology, there's a lot of sort of more niche majors. And so explore those with your kid. I actually do think that, like, showing them possible majors, like doing that
really
sort of
thing.
research and then curating it for them is actually a nice thing that you can do kind of behind the scenes. So that but then they have to take it and be like, oh, I've discovered that, like, this is a major, like, and what jobs it leads into and so forth. Like, like, oh, like, my kid who applied for sustainable planning, like, what is this? And what jobs does it lead into? So I think, like, they have to then research that and figure out if it's really right for them. But you can present them, like, here's one possibility, you can major in this or this or this, here's all these.
I also think it's important, though, that teens don't need to know what they're going to do yet. Like, they're so young and they're going to change their mind probably. My oldest, I mean, how many times did he change his major? Because it was a joke right at the end.
And now he's getting a PhD.
I know.
And now
he changed his major.
Now your youngest is changing his major constantly.
I know. What is that? Is that a reflection of me as a parent?
It's common. And so then that's a reason to make sure, again, this sort of background research that you can do as a parent, that you can help them figure out, well, do I want to be at a liberal arts school where I can change my major to the last minute or
10
design it
times.
myself, you know?
Yeah.
Or do I want to be at a big school, you know, where they allow you to change majors? Or, you know, do I want to commit to something and, you know, have this track and not be distracted by everything
Right. Which is
else?
really good for some students.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think my youngest could have benefited from that, but you know, they are who they are, right? I was just going to tell you yesterday, he was just changing his courses for the upcoming year because
Of course he was.
he changed his focus again. Yeah. So, and that could change again, right? So
Of course.
who knows? But I also really like exploratory programs. I think they're really great if you truly don't know. But I would caution if you have a kid who really wants to go into engineering or computer science or anything, that's kind of difficult to then go into. I mean, to switch at a large university if they don't have an
At a
exploratory
large
program.
university, if it doesn't have an exploratory, but
Yeah.
at, you know, there are liberal arts schools that have
Yeah.
engineering, you know, like there are
Even
a
in
few.
those, though, sometimes you need to be taking
In the
certain
Trinity.
classes
Yeah.
in your
Mhm.
freshman year. So just they should be
Yeah,
aware
that's
of that.
very true. And then,
Yeah.
you know, computing, there are BAs in computing and, you know, things
Yeah.
like that, that's a little bit more open-ended.
Basically, there's going to be options, really, but
Mhm.
it depends really what the interest is. Okay. Self-reporting AP scores on the application. Should
That's
you
on
do
your
that?
student side. Yeah.
Don't put it on the
Do
transcript.
not put
Don't do
put
that.
scores on your transcript.
It's
Schools have
not.
specifically said they don't want that. They want those scores in the control of your student. I know we know you're a homeschooler, and so you know you feel like, but it isn't. My kid and I talked about this, like, it, but from admissions perspective,
It's a best practice.
it's
That's
a
what
best
it is.
practice. You want to follow school best practices
Yeah.
to the greatest extent that you can. So
Yeah.
that makes
So
sense
don't put
for
the scores on
So
there.
yeah, just don't leave it.
Yeah.
Don't put it on there.
Should you highlight specific providers in the school profile?
I think in the profile, yes.
Yeah. That's usually where we recommend it.
I think in the profile, you want to put in, particularly if you used a particular type of provider, like we used live online courses for this, you know, with, you know, teacher-led or small courses or courses with high interaction with the teacher, you know, however you want to describe that. You know, or like, oh, we used, you know, dual enrollment at a community college, you know, on campus, you know, it's that kind of thing. Like those are
Right.
buzzwords they're actually looking for.
Yeah.
You know, that your student had teacher interaction, that they were live on a campus. And you don't have to have those things, but I'm saying those are things that look good. And so you should highlight it in the profile. And then I suggest listing the providers you used in the profile.
Yeah.
We don't like putting them on the transcript.
No, it makes it messy and not easy to read.
Exactly.
You want it super easy to read.
I do say put demarcate if it was at a, like, especially like if your student was in school for part of the, you know, say you need to make clear, you know, that these were transferred to your homeschool, that kind of thing. And dual enrollment. But having like a whole extra column, you know, or a ton or more than like, you know, 2 or 3 different symbols or more than a couple of like abbreviations or something.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it gets so confusing.
Hard to read.
Where they have to, like, you know, what am I looking here? You know, it just, you know, and that's the same thing too. Like there are these hybrid versions where it's a subject and a year by year transcript.
Right.
Like with these columns. But I have to tell you, like,
it's hard
I find it hard to read. And so anything that's hard to read, like you lost whatever benefit you got from using both versions of the transcript, you kind of lose. You can't do a credit distribution. We've done that with other students. I did that for my son because I wanted to highlight the year by year looked really good for him, because he had a nice progression of courses that had increased in rigor. But I wanted to highlight that he had done 5 Englishes, 5 social studies, 5, you know, across the board. He did not do 5 foreign language, but he did do 5 like arts and tech courses, like combined arts and tech, like architecture and graphic
which
design.
You really wanted to highlight.
I wanted to highlight all of those things.
Yeah.
Like that, you know, he had 5 science credits and 5 social studies credits, and well, he actually had more than 5 social studies, but he had like 5 of a lot of like all these, the 4 cores.
Core.
And I thought that looked really good. So I put a distribution table at the bottom, but teeny, you know, it's just like a, you know,
Teeny and cute.
It's easy to see
and easy to read. I would say too, it's always a good idea, I think, to make a couple transcripts. You can make one as a subject and one as a year by year and see which one shows up your students.
Yeah, sometimes you can't tell until you do it.
Yeah,
I do that for clients all the time, where I'm like, I wonder if this would look better. And sometimes I put it in and then I'm like, nope.
Nope.
Then I delete it.
Definitely not. But
like, no.
Sometimes you can't tell. So
yeah,
that's always a good thing to do.
We had a lot of music courses, and then we did it like it was the year by year, and we're like, well, this is good because look, you can see. And then I did it as a subject. I was like, oh no, this is the way to do it, because we can really
it's highlighting
music.
Yeah. I like subject transcripts, but it's not right for everyone. But I think it is worth it to try both ways.
Yeah.
Are
we gonna what else do you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think I think I've covered all the questions I saw. Is there any more?
I don't see others. I can't always tell when I'm on the Facebook.
Let's do this. Let's do this real quick. Okay. Let's talk about, here's something I've always wanted to talk about. Let's do that. Let's talk about something I've always wanted to talk about.
Are you just changing the subject entirely? Watch out. I don't know. I have no idea what Jill's about to say.
No, I want to talk about if this is your only kid or your youngest, is it hard to transition out of homeschooling?
I mean, I think some people.
I'm just thinking about those. Yeah.
I mean, I'm chuckling a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, it can be very sad. And I think sometimes that feeling is what makes you get super involved in the process, because it's the last thing that is kind of you're in control of a bit, and it's the last thing you're going to do with your teen.
I mean, I remember it is a transition. Like I remember having a conversation with a parent where they were like, well, we'll finish this up in the summer, you know, it always runs over. And I'm like, no, you won't.
At the end of senior year summer.
Yeah. Stop right there. Like, no.
Yeah.
So I do think like it is, like you said, there's a mom that we actually worked with ages ago, who I heard from later. I don't know if you know this, but like, who was like, said that she had a really sad like first semester where the kid was gone, and it was the youngest, and it was and
it's so hard.
Yeah, and that it was, you know, and had to sort of pivot and figure out things for herself.
That's the thing I would like everyone to just kind of keep in mind, that, you know, it can be difficult, this transition, especially if you've been homeschooling for years, you know, and we were doing it from the beginning, and I love homeschooling so much. I mean, so much. And all the memories we had when they were little, you know, and that's why I look at my memories every day, right? Yeah. But they're going to pick up and leave, all of them, at some point. So just be prepared. I would also throw in there that, you know, it's a good idea to pick up, like, take care of yourself this year, find something new to do, start thinking about your next stage in life. I always think that's worth it.
I mean, for some parents, you know, they've been working,
you
know, especially through
really
high school, or they've been, you know, so they don't necessarily need that, you know, I think it depends, but I have seen it. I know multiple homeschool moms who became preschool teachers after their
That's so cute, because they just wanted to be around little ones again.
They wanted to be around the little ones.
Yeah. That's a good idea,
kind of start
actually.
all over, but without all the responsibility. Like they're just there part-time.
You see them part of the day, and then it's like grandkids, right? You get to see them, but then they have to go home to their parents.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
The Facebook memories, there's like a Facebook memory that I always share where it's like, I think the kids were in maybe the kindergarten, and we were doing like ancient history, story of the world, like reading aloud, and
like we all did back in the day.
I know, like we all did back in the day, and they had the Playmobil Romans, and we made we made like we made a Roman road that was like really like a Roman road. Like we gathered pebbles, and then there was the sand layer and the other, like they all the layers, like,
Right.
in the, I'm like, these roads, you can still walk on them, like, like it's because they're so good. And then we made it in a cake pan, and then the little Roman soldiers are on it, and there's a little picture of like one of my kids with the little Roman soldier in the Roman road, like, and
So cute.
it's so stinking cute. It's just like absurd. And I do get nostalgic. Like, I do think like some of us, as we're making this paperwork, and that I will say that's a thing too, I'll be careful of. Like, I think some
don't
of
talk
us
about
don't talk about that in
no
college.
don't go back too far.
You may be feeling nostalgia for why you started this process. And sometimes it's not even nostalgia. Sometimes it's trauma. Like sometimes it's like in third grade, my kid was like literally being beaten up,
Bullied
or
or something.
the
Yeah.
teacher like victimized them, or the, I mean, like horrible things that have happened to kids in school. And so sometimes it's not like this wistful nostalgia of us like did this on purpose. Sometimes it is like this sort of like anger that gets stirred up about that. But it's just not the place to address anything to do with it. Like you can be like, we chose this because our neighborhood schools were blah blah blah, or we didn't have
I definitely think you
or,
can have a little bit just why it started, but the main focus should be on the high school years.
We started because we wanted more time with our family when our kids were younger, and we continued because our students, I think I said my student chose this, I think for both of them in high school, and I said why.
I think for my oldest son, I said, we started homeschooling because he had physical disabilities, because I thought that was important to know. We continued homeschooling because it was the best thing for him.
Right, exactly. And then focus entirely on high school. I think that's, I can't tell you. I mean, sometimes, I have read counselor letters where there's a sweet anecdote, like, at age 6, I walked in and he'd taken apart the computer, and now look at him, he wants to be a computer engineer,
Right.
Like,
that's one line.
Right, exactly. Like, and it's bloomed into this senior project where he, now sells computers online, like it something like that works really well. I think it's nice. It's a little personal, but like I've seen ones where people are just like, the kindergarten teacher said, I'm just like, oh my gosh, stop. Like, because I understand why it's important for the parent, but it's not important to admissions. You've lost them.
Yeah. And that's the case where they may just stop reading.
Yeah.
And you don't want that to happen. One of the biggest benefits to being a homeschooler and applying to colleges is that the parent controls the paperwork. Yes. So you want to use that paperwork to your benefit. So don't do anything where it's hard to read, it's too much information that they don't want, or anything like that. They're just going to not look at it.
I mean, it's the same thing that I tell students about their essay. Is sometimes like there's an essay that they really need to get out of them. Like they're like, this is my story. And they write it up and I'm like, you're too close to this. Like, and it's not resolved yet. And it's, it's coming off. It's
not serving you.
And it's, it's just not, it's not showing you well. It's almost the same thing for parents. Like we're talking about how you need to like process and like figure out your next steps and like decide your next act. And like some parents like need to process like, okay, what was this homeschooling thing all about? Like, and so then that's one goal, but then don't send that part to colleges, like, because that's your own personal process.
Yeah. Don't put too much of that in there.
No.
The counselor letter really should be you highlighting the things that you think are important that they should know about your student, especially if it's anything that this isn't on the student side that they haven't talked about yet. It's your chance to do that.
I think it is a good place to, I'm thinking of students I've worked with who they don't want to sort of be
discuss certain things.
About certain things. Whether it's their own health or a family crisis. Like I'm thinking of a situation where a kid endured a big family crisis and was like, no, I don't want to make excuses for myself. I don't want to,
or they're just not comfortable talking about it.
Right. They're just not comfortable. And the mom, like, I was like, I want you to spell
address
out.
it.
As long as you're comfortable with it, I want you to spell it out. That this kid had to school themselves, that, nobody was there for them because of very big other issues, and
it provides context.
exactly. And so I think things like that, whether, you know, it's a mental health crisis or a physical health crisis or a family crisis, like all that kind of stuff. If you do have something like that, that is the best place, in my opinion, to put it.
Yeah, I
I mean,
agree.
there are places on the Common App for like additional information on the student side. So they do have other opportunities, but I think this is the place where you as the counselor get to contextualize it. And your voice has, in this particular arena, can have a little bit more sway than the student voice, because it is the case that sometimes, you know, like the student that I'm thinking of, you know, they didn't want to be like, oh, I don't want to make excuses. And I don't think it would have come off that way, but sometimes it can, whereas the parent contextualizing it in the letter in a really clear way, you know, can come off really, can come off.
It comes out differently.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially if the student didn't mention it at all. Like that's very appropriate for the parent to put that in.
But you can work with your student to figure out what they're saying and what you're saying. Like, you know, you don't have to repeat each other.
Yeah. Don't repeat each other. I mean, for the most part, you both have opportunities to share. Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else?
I mean, can I say the thing that you were like, we shouldn't put it this way?
You may say anything you want. Go ahead.
Oh, wait. So then it's my fault? Is that?
You just said, may I say the thing? You may say the thing. I'll say something after you say something.
Get out of their way. That's what I would say. Yeah. I mean, make sure you're not in their way. Because let
them take control of it.
Yes.
Especially the parts that they can, you know, that it's appropriate.
Push them to take control. And if they're not doing it, sometimes you have to step back and see what happens.
And if they're really not doing it, they may not be ready to go off to college, which is not a bad thing at all. You know, sometimes it's just right to, you know, stay home a couple of years, go to community college or something that work. I mean, not
year.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm a proponent of the 5th year of high school because one of my kids did that. A gap year, one of my kids did. And another kid stayed home for 2 years and did community college. All of them are successful now. There's different paths for everyone. Mm-hmm. This is what I was saying about don't get caught up in all of this, you know, make sure you're doing exactly what's right for your team. They'll thank you for that in the long run.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Yeah, get out of the way a little bit. Get out of the way. They're almost 18. They may be 18. They're about to be adults. They're going to be fine. Everyone's going to have options.
Adults. Like I would say, you know, I guess I would leave it with that too. Like that they're legally adults. You're about to lose the ability to talk to their doctors, to talk to the school, to talk to to do a bunch of things for them, legally speaking. Yeah. And it's going to require their consent and their cooperation for all of it. And they legally have to take the lead, practically speaking. So you have to figure out how that's going to work. And so,
and you want them to be able to take the lead. Yes, you want them to have the confidence that they can do it.
You want them to launch. This is the whole goal.
You want them out of here, even though it's super sad. Yes. It's super sad. You want them out of here. Last year was my first year with all of them gone.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I had 3 and all 3 of them gone was very hard. But, you know, I'm so happy that they're living their own lives and that they're doing their own thing. That's all I ever wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super happy for my kid who's doing so well in college.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he was so happy there. He went back for the summer.
Yeah. You haven't even seen him that much.
He did an internship.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So that's really a good place to end.
Yes.
All right. I will make this available as a recording and then share our outtakes from the beginning, which were quite funny. You can follow us on Instagram. We also have a Facebook page, Simplify, where we put a lot of this, and then in the group. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.